Have you ever wondered how one single person could possibly conquer two entirely unrelated disciplines? I mean, really think about it for a second. We're talking about mastering the intensely mental, deeply strategic world of chess, and then completely pivoting to dominate the incredibly physical, dynamic combat of a martial art. It sounds kind of impossible, right? Usually, someone is either a strategic, sit-down chess genius, or they're a physically elite martial artist. But today, we're going to look at the exact blueprint of someone who actually did both, reaching the absolute top 1% of the world in two vastly different arenas.
Welcome to today's Explainer. We are doing a deep dive, book summary and review of Josh Waitzkin's fascinating book, The Art of Learning. And what's so cool here is that Waitzkin isn't just handing us abstract theories, he is giving us the very framework he lived and breathed to achieve world-class status twice over. We're going to extract his universal learning principles, the exact blueprint that you and I can use to accelerate our own skills and perform at the highest level in literally any discipline we choose.
Okay, let's just look at this wild contrast for a moment. On one hand, you have chess. It's a purely intellectual, strategic board game that demands immense mental stamina and calculation. Then on the other hand, you've got Tai Chi push hands. This is physical, demanding, close-contact martial arts combat, where balance, reflex, and raw physicality are everything. Honestly, these seem like they require completely different parts of the human brain and body. Yet, Waitzkin's unbelievable transition proves that the underlying architecture of mastery, how you actually go about learning, is exactly the same for both.
So here is our roadmap for this explainer. 1. From chess to Tai Chi. 2. Principle 1. Feel the fundamentals. 3. Principle 2. Stay true. 4. Principle 3. Invest in loss. And 5. Your path to mastery.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, from chess to Tai Chi, the prodigy's shift.
So this timeline is actually wild. Waitzkin starts playing chess when he's just 6 years old. By the time he hits 16, he earns the title of International Master. I mean, he's a certified, world-renowned prodigy. But then, at age 21, he makes this massive, unexpected shift. He steps entirely away from chess and sets his sights on Tai Chi push hands. And get this, merely 7 years later, he wins the Tai Chi push hands World Championship in Taiwan. This was an absolutely unprecedented feat for an American outsider. But his quick rise wasn't magic, and it wasn't a fluke. It was largely due to these universal learning principles he had already baked into his brain while learning chess.
Which brings us to part 2. Principle 1. Feel the fundamentals.
You know, when most of us try to learn chess, we start with all 32 pieces on the board right from the get-go. It's totally overwhelming. But Josh's teacher did something brilliant. He completely cleared the board. Step 1, just the king and a single pawn. That's it. He played with just those 2 pieces until their movements felt incredibly comfortable in his mind. Step 2, he added a few more pawns and a knight, focusing purely on basic knight principles, like looking for a double attack where you attack 2 pieces at once. Only after these basic, isolated movements felt completely natural did he move to step 3, gradually layering on the more complex pieces like the bishop, the rook, and the queen. He intentionally went slow early on so he could go incredibly fast later.
To really drive this learning process home, Waitzkin uses this great brick wall analogy. Imagine the skill you're trying to master is a brick wall. That bottom layer of bricks, those represent the absolute bare-bones fundamental components of a skill. For example, if you're learning to figure skate, those foundational bricks are just simply gliding, turning, and skating backward with deep relaxation. You absolutely have to lay these base bricks perfectly. But here's the real secret sauce, the mortar. The mortar between those bricks is the intuitive, effortless feel you develop for each fundamental component. If you just rush and stack bricks on top of one another without applying this mortar, and crucially, without giving it enough time to dry, well, what happens? Your foundation ends up incredibly weak. Any advanced, flashy techniques you try to add on top are going to be shaky, and the ultimate height of your wall, your personal ceiling for mastery, will be severely restricted. You've got to practice the basics until they aren't just something you understand in your head, but until you literally feel them in your bones.
Let's move on to part 3. Principle 2. Stay true.
So as a kid, Josh loved hanging out with the chess hustlers in New York's Washington Square Park. Naturally, he gravitated toward their aggressive, chaotic, fast, and wild attacking style. It perfectly fit his personality. He loved finding brilliant attacks hidden within total chaos by just trusting his gut. But later in his career, he put his faith in a formal grandmaster who forced a totally different style on him, the anaconda style.
This method was all about suffocating the opponent by slowly eliminating their options with perfect positional play. And because he was forced to abandon his natural inclinations and adopt this totally foreign style, his deep love for the game simply vanished. It literally killed his passion, and he actually stopped competing. This quote from the book really hits the nail on the head. Waitskin warns that the transition to becoming a conscious high performer relies so heavily on staying in harmony with your unique disposition. There isn't just one correct way to master a skill, but there is an absolute wrong way, and that's not being true to yourself. If you're a writer, sure, it's okay to mimic someone else's style at first to learn the ropes, but ultimately, you have to turn the discipline into a creative expression of your own uniqueness. If you don't, your passion is just going to burn out.
Now for part 4, which might be my favorite. Principle 3, invest in loss. This is where the story gets really fascinating. Back in the summer of 1994, Josh suffered a devastating, truly heartbreaking loss in the Under-18 World Chess Championship after he boldly declined a draw. But instead of wallowing, he used that immense pain as fuel. Over the next 10 hours, he intensely studied the exact game he just lost and uncovered a critical, strategic error in his mid-game defense. Now fast forward a full decade later, he's standing in the finals of the Tai Chi World Championship, pushed to the absolute edge of defeat by a ferocious opponent. In that terrifying moment of helplessness, his brain fired up and he remembered the exact principle he learned from that painful chess match 10 years earlier.
His critical realization in that moment was that he needed to intentionally make a slight adjustment to leave himself open to an attack. It sounds crazy, right? But by doing so, he allowed his opponent to rush in, which perfectly enabled Josh to use the guy's own ferocious aggression against him, creating the perfect opening for a massive counterattack. And it worked perfectly. He turned the entire match around and took home the world championship. But remember, he never, ever would have gained that martial arts insight if he hadn't cared deeply, put his ego on the line, suffered a terrible loss in chess, and then rigorously analyzed his mistakes. Losses generate pain, for sure, but that pain is the required fuel for deep technical and psychological correction.
Finally, let's wrap this up with part 5, your path to mastery.
So how do we apply this? Here is the ultimate blueprint we've distilled from today's book review. First, isolate the fundamental components of your discipline. Don't just practice them until you understand them in theory. Practice them until that mortar dries and they feel completely intuitively natural. Second, stay true to your style. It's totally fine to mimic your idols initially, but always make sure you are ultimately building out your own unique voice and expressing your real personality. Third, you've got to invest in loss. Put your ego on the line. Routinely seek out fierce competition or scary public performances, and when you inevitably lose, because you will, don't hide from it, analyze those painful losses rigorously to find your technical and psychological errors.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought straight from Josh Waitzkin's worldview. How will you use heartbreak to fuel hard work? The greatest insights in our lives usually come from our lowest moments, but only if we have the courage to look closely at them. So, next time you face a crushing defeat in your work or your passions, remember the chess prodigy who literally turned a painful board game loss into a martial arts world championship. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive into the blueprint of mastery. Take these tools, go build your foundation, and keep pushing your limits.